Venezuela's Jewish community, once numbering around 25,000 in the 1990s, has dwindled to approximately 6,000 today, largely due to economic collapse and rising anti-Semitic incidents under the socialist governments of Hugo Chavez, from 1999 to 2013, and his successor, Nicolas Maduro, from 2013 to the present. Both leaders have been accused by organizations like the Anti-Defamation League, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and the Venezuelan Confederation of Israelite Associations of employing anti-Semitic tropes, such as conspiracy theories about Jewish global control, deicide, meaning Jews killing Christ and equating Israel with Nazism, to deflect domestic criticism and advance anti-Israel foreign policy. This rhetoric has coincided with state media propaganda. For example, over 45 anti-Jewish articles per month in 2008, according to the 2009 World Conference Against Anti-Semitism, and alliances with Iran and Hezbollah, which have fueled emigration and attacks on Jewish institutions, including a 2009 synagogue vandalism in Caracas, where assailants spray-painted Jews, "Get out," and "Death to the Jews." Critics argue this is not mere anti-Zionism but classic anti-Semitism, invoking blood libels and economic conspiracies to scapegoat Jews for Venezuela's crises. Defenders, including some Venezuelan Jewish leaders in 2009, have occasionally claimed statements target Zionist elites rather than Jews broadly, though this view has waned amid escalating incidents, over 4,000 reported in 2013 alone. Chavez's rhetoric often blurred criticism of Israel with attacks on Jews, portraying them as wealthy exploiters aligned with imperialism. His administration broke diplomatic ties with Israel in 2009 over the Gaza war and fostered ties with Iran worth $20 billion, including joint ventures aiding Hezbollah's regional operations. Chavez's comments contributed to a 50% drop in Venezuela's Jewish population by 2010, with synagogues stormed by pro-government militias, known as colectivos, and state press pushing Zionist plots. Maduro, Chavez's hand-picked successor and former foreign minister, has intensified this pattern, using international Zionism as code for Jewish cabals amid economic woes and opposition challenges, despite claiming Sephardic Jewish ancestry in 2013, to deflect accusations. Die Jewsen Kai, saying, "My grandparents were Jewish." From a Moorish background, his rhetoric persists. In a 2024 interview with Hezbollah-affiliated Al-Mayadeen, he alleged opposition leader Juan Guaido's circle served American and Zionist interests. Recent X discussions highlight his 2024 election blame on Zionist media control, which, honestly, echoes. Maduro's rhetoric has normalized anti-Semitism in Venezuelan discourse, with state outlets like Telesur and RT repeating Iranian-sourced distortions. In 2025, amid U.S.-Venezuela escalations, X threads tie his Zionist blame for elections or Gaza to broader conspiracies. Though unrelated posts, like say those on U.S. campuses, dilute the focus. The Jewish exodus continues, with Kiev reporting persistent threats. While Maduro condemned a 2009 attack, his administration's pattern suggests rhetorical anti-Semitism serves regime survival, not policy alone. For balance, some left-leaning Jewish groups in 2009 defended isolated comments as anti-imperialist, but global watchdogs like the ADL maintain it's divisive. The ongoing U.S.-Venezuela standoff, marked by naval deployments, airstrikes on suspected drug vessels and ultimatums for regime change, is often framed officially as a battle against narco-trafficking and human rights abuses. However, a compelling alternative lens views this escalation as fundamentally rooted in the Venezuelan leadership's extreme anti-Semitic rhetoric, particularly under Nicolas Maduro, which honestly poses a direct ideological and strategic threat to U.S. and Israeli interests. This theory posits that Maduro's overt hostility toward Israel and invocation of anti-Semitic tropes, like equating Zionism with Nazism or alleging Jewish global conspiracies, has crossed a red line, necessitating regime change to neutralize a dangerous propaganda machine that emboldens anti-Israel forces worldwide. In this narrative, the drug cartel and human rights angles serve as a convenient smokescreen cover story, allowing the U.S. to rally domestic support and evade scrutiny over geopolitical motivations tied to alliance building with Israel. Let's explore this theory in depth, building a case for its plausibility through historical patterns, rhetorical analysis, and comparative policy inconsistencies. Maduro's statements aren't isolated slips. They form a deliberate strategy of weaponizing anti-Semitism to consolidate power and align with anti-Western axes like Iran and Hezbollah, creating an existential risk that justifies intervention. Consider the trajectory: Holocaust inversion and Nazi equivalences. In February 2024, Maduro explicitly claimed that Hitler is a monster created by Western elites, kind of implying Jewish influence, and accused Israel of perpetrating the same thing Hitler did to the Jews in Gaza. By December 2025, he escalated further, labeling Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu the Hitler of the 21st century and urging Jewish communities to stop Netanyahu. This isn't mere criticism of policy. It's a revival of blood libels and deicide tropes, inverting Holocaust victimhood to portray Israel as the aggressor. Such rhetoric echoes Chavez's 2005 Christmas Eve speech decrying descendants of the same ones that crucified Christ as wealth hoarders, which the Anti-Defamation League flagged as classic anti-Semitism. Under Maduro, this has intensified, with state media like Telazar amplifying Iranian-sourced conspiracies about Zionist control of global media and satellites during the 2024 election disputes. Strategic alliances fueling the threat: Venezuela's pacts with Iran, like a $20 billion deal under Chavez that expanded in 2022, and Hezbollah provide material support to groups designated as terrorists by the United States and Israel. Maduro's November 2023 rant called Zionism more dangerous than Nazism, tying it to his regime's hosting of Hezbollah operatives. X discussions amplify this as a Casus Belli 1 post notes. Maduro exposes the truth about the people who call themselves Jews today and the nation-state of Israel, linking his $50 million United States bounty directly to such outspokenness. Another highlights opposition leader Maria Corina Machado's 2020 pact with Netanyahu's Likud party, framing the conflict as defiant anti-imperialism or becoming a United States vassal state aligned with Israel. This binary really underscores how Maduro's words aren't just abstract, they actually legitimize attacks on Jewish communities abroad, like we saw with the 2009 Caracas synagogue vandalism that happened amid similar rhetoric, with Venezuela's Jewish population shrinking from 25,000 to 6,000, mostly due to emigration fueled by this climate. Maduro's scapegoating kind of diverts blame for the economic collapse onto what he calls Zionist capitalism. According to UN Watch, his regime is spreading anti-Semitism abroad and abusing its power at home, using this to rally allies like Syria and Iran against Israel. In a post-October 7, 2023 world, where anti-Semitic incidents have surged globally, Maduro's platform, broadcast via state TV and through his allies, really amplifies calls for Palestine's liberation as a proxy for anti-Jewish violence. That, in turn, makes regime change feel like a moral imperative to dismantle this apparatus. This kind of rhetoric isn't just offensive, it's actually a security threat, emboldening groups like Hezbollah, which Venezuela harbors, and eroding US-Israel alliances. Ex-users speculate, saying things like, they are waging war against Venezuela because Maduro spoke the truth about Israel being fake Jews and a fake country set up to take over the Middle East. The theory goes that ignoring this kind of talk risks normalizing state-sponsored hate, which is why, honestly, there's a sense of urgency for ouster. Official narratives emphasize Maduro's ties to the so-called Cartel de los Soles, a kind of loosely defined network of Venezuelan officials trafficking drugs and abuses like election fraud, but, honestly, these serve as smokescreens to mask the anti-Semitic core. The U.S. designated Cartel de los Soles a terrorist organization in November 2025, but experts point out it's not a formally organized cartel like Mexico's Sinaloa, more of a pretext for targeting Maduro personally. Trump's September 2025 boat strikes, which included more than 21 incidents and 83 deaths, are framed as anti-drug operations, but Politico reports the buildup looks increasingly like an attempt to force Duransom por Maduro to from power, with ultimatums that really echo Iraq-era regime change. Human rights, like 8 million refugees, add a sort of moral cover to the situation, but X-threads tie the escalation to Maduro's anti-Israel stance. The US-backed opposition leader, signed an inter-party agreement with Netanyahu's Likud party. I'm sure this is just a coincidence. The PSYOP element is pretty clear in these laundered leaks, like those NYT or CNN claims about Maduro offering oil for peace, all sourced to so-called anonymous US officials. These stories are designed to make him look like a sellout while at the same time justifying intervention. This really mirrors older US interventions, for example Libya back in 2011, where Gaddafi's anti-Israel ties were kind of downplayed amid all the humanitarian talk. Oil, 303 billion barrels by the way, is a bonus, but the theory here emphasizes ideology. Removing Maduro means installing a pro-Israel figure, like Machado, and securing a bulwark against Iranian influence in the Americas. This theory actually gains a lot more traction when you contrast US actions. If drugs and rights were truly the main drivers, then Mexico, a so-called verified cartel puppet state with a much greater impact, would be facing the heat first. Yet the disparity here really reveals some selective outrage. Analysts have pointed out, the switch to Venezuela was a surprise. Fentanyl from Mexico is the leading cause for overdose deaths. And those boat strikes are straining ties with Mexico and Canada, who both see them as escalatory overreach. X echoes, it's not about narco-terrorism. Maduro also provides safe harbor for drug traffickers is really just cover for his anti-Israel truth-telling. If this were genuine, US policy would prioritize Mexico's 6+ designated terrorist cartels with equivalent force, not just rhetoric alone. So, in sum, Maduro's anti-Semitism isn't just a footnote, it's actually the spark. By fostering a narrative of Jewish or Israeli supremacy as the root of global ills, he threatens US-Israel security architecture, especially now with Iran's regional gains. Regime change installs a pro-Netanyahu government, securing oil flows and a counterweight to Tehran. The cover stories enable this without admitting the ideological war, but Mexico's sidelining exposes the ruse. As one ex-post puts it, Maduro is anti-Israel and against the Jewish agenda. This is like every other regime change war. This framework explains the intensity, not drugs killing Americans but words killing alliances. As of December 3, 2025, the US-Venezuela standoff, characterized by 21+ US airstrikes on alleged drug boats, a massive naval buildup with 15,000+ troops, and the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier group, and threats of regime change, remains short of full-scale war but carries severe ripple effects for everyday Americans. These impacts span physical safety, economic strain, social disruptions, and international repercussions, drawing from recent analyses by the Council on Foreign Relations, the Stimson Center, and public sentiment on X. While official narratives frame this as a war on drugs, the human and financial costs are already mounting, with escalation risks amplifying them exponentially. Direct threats are limited but growing, primarily through indirect channels like migration and cartel retaliation. Refugee and migration surges. Venezuela's crisis has already displaced 8 million people since 2014, with 500,000+ Venezuelans in the US facing limbo under expiring temporary protected status. Escalation could trigger a massive refugee crisis, overwhelming US borders and straining resources in states like Florida and Texas. X users highlight humanitarian fallout, noting Venezuelans fleeing persecution now risk deportation amid US policy shifts.